Welcome to another episode of the Feature Presentation Podcast, where every week we take a deep dive into the trenches of independent filmmaking. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and this week I'm excited to welcome actor Jackie Dallas to the show. Jackie, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great, Derek. How are you doing?
Fantastic. And I've been really excited to have this chat with you since we booked it a few weeks ago. And you're actually just coming off of HorrorCon LA, which was this past weekend out in Los Angeles. So how was that for you?
That was pretty awesome. I love doing conventions. I mean, I've been doing it for a couple of years. This was the very first HorrorCon LA that was hosted. And actually, it was my very first HorrorCon also. I do a lot of like regular comic conventions. And this is my first horror one. It was different vibe.
Yeah, I've never been to a horror convention personally. I've heard that they exist. There was one in Atlanta for several years back when The Walking Dead was really at its like the peak of its popularity. But never been to a horror themed one, but they sound very interesting for sure. And I'm always curious, because I've been going to conventions now for almost a decade, and it's fun to go as a fan because you get to see, actors such as yourself, other people who have worked on films. And then you have the cosplayers, you get to see all the cool merchandise, and some of it's incredible because it's all handmade by just diehard fans of whether it's like Doctor Who or whatever your medium is. So how is it for you as an actor to go to conventions and interact with your fans?
Yeah. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and every convention is so different, like horror cons, like you said, versus some of them are more anime focused. Some of them are more TV and film focused. Some of the major ones like San Diego Comic-Con, it's kind of turned into a reveal for DC and Marvel and all of the major franchises. So every convention has a very different vibe to it. For me as an actor, having my little table set up for signings and photographs and stuff, it really is just about kind of engaging with the fans and really getting to talk to people, taking that time and meeting everyone. And I don't know, talking about the projects that I've got that they're fans of, talking about our favorite characters, our favorite seasons, any, stories behind the scenes. I don't know. I just think it's really cool to connect in a way that you can't really do so on social media or, so remotely. Right. I'm so sorry. The light just completely shifted. Let me turn my blinds real quick.
No worries.
With the horror convention, there were so many just classic horror movie actors that were there, from Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, or so many of these like dead zombie movies. And there were really, really good displays. I'd say that the horror conventions have probably the most impressive exhibitor displays of any of the other conventions, because you've got a lot of these special effects, makeup people who come out and they're so talented. Sometimes they'll do live demonstrations where you can just walk by and they're just, I don't know, turning a beautiful person into a zombie, or their animatronics that they've got set up, or their prosthetics that they've got set up. And it's just so incredible to look at. For me, I have to carve out the time to walk around for a little bit in between. But for the most part, that's my experience there. And it's a lot of fun. It's very social. We try and be as approachable as possible.
Yeah, and that was what I was curious too, as someone who attends, as a guest, if you find the time to actually wander the convention floor, because as you mentioned, you see some really incredible stuff, like the demonstrations with makeup, people that might have for Pensacon one year, someone brought out a life-size replica of the Ecto-1 from Ghostbusters. You'll have the DeLorean from Back to the Future. It's really cool stuff. And like you mentioned, social media is great because you can interact with people fairly easily, but it doesn't replicate that face-to-face connection that you get. Because there's something to be said about, if you want to meet someone or you've wanted to meet them for years, you can talk
Mhm.
to them on Twitter, if you get the chance, but is that face
Right.
to face connection is just, you can't beat it.
Yeah, it's a completely different like spark of energy.
So talk to me about how you got started with your career, because I know you initially went into a very different field, which is funny
Mhm.
because something I say almost ad nauseum on the show is that there's not a how-to guidebook on how to get in the film industry, and that's almost as fascinating as people's actual careers is how they got into it, because every story is different. So tell me your story and what led you to your career in acting.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no roadmap to success in this industry. And that's both kind of inspiring and then kind of daunting because you don't always know what you're doing when you're doing it. In my past life, when I was growing up, I loved acting. I always wanted to be an actor, but I grew up in Florida also. And in this tiny little small beach town, there's absolutely no TV or filming opportunities, really. It's really theater. That's kind of the bread and butter of what we have over there. And becoming an actor, growing up to do that as a living seems so far-fetched. It felt like such a fantasy world, something that you couldn't just like grow up to be. You had to be born into it, you had to be discovered, yada yada. So I went down a completely different track. I went into medicine. I did microbiology with a minor in biochemistry, and then medical school. I did a year of research. I did residency. I did an internship in general surgery, and then I did a couple of years of residency in pathology. And essentially, right when I was graduating, like right before I graduated from residency, I had a year left. I called it quits and I left, moved to California, packed my car up. I was living in Chicago at the time. Um, so when I was in Chicago, I'd say like it wasn't just an overnight decision. That's a little reckless. It was that I found that I had a little more time in my new specialty doing pathology. And weekends, evenings, I found myself like wanting to get back to something creative, something that I like an outlet, something to do outside of work. And I slowly got back into acting by doing background work and then meeting people doing that, student films, indie films, basically where I think every actor pretty much starts out and realized how much I loved it. And I don't know, after that, I kind of started researching more into it. Like, how do I turn this into a real full-time viable career? And decided to take the plunge. And my husband, my fiance at the time, he ended up getting a job in California. So that kind of solidified the decision to, hey, you know what? I'm always going to have an MD. I can move to California. I have to start over anyways, because California, like doctor licensing is state by state. So I'd have to get licensed in California and all of that. I was like, if I have to start over anyways, let's try something else for a little while and see what happens. And, medicine's always there to fall back on. But that was in 2014 when I packed my SUV up, did Route 66 all the way down, and I haven't really looked back.
Well, that takes a lot of courage, especially with the medical field, and how, what's the right word to say this? Because I don't want to I don't want to downplay it, but it seems like there's always medical jobs that are needed, and they'd be pretty easy to find if you have a degree. But to be set up like that, but then to still want to have that creative outlet that's satisfying to you, and then and the fact that your now husband found a job in California, it was almost like it was meant to be.
Yeah, that's what we say. We think it was, I don't know, stupid luck because we're originally from New York as well. Like that's where we met. And so we were planning to try and get back to New York or him get a job in Chicago. And then we just kind of settled there for a minute. He wasn't supposed to match in California. That program was a little bit further down his list, but yeah, that's where we ended up. And then, yeah, that's what we say. It was meant to be. It kind of prompted us to make a decision, prompted me to make a decision.
It was almost like the universe was telling you that
Mm-hmm.
that was the
Mm-hmm.
right move. So once you move out to California and you decide, okay, I'm going to give this acting thing a go, how do you then get your foot in the door? Because I imagine the scene in California is just a tiny bit different than Daytona.
Yeah, yeah, it's very different. I mean, I came in pretty cold. I didn't go to school for film or acting. I don't have any friends or relatives here. We're the only ones here on the West Coast. Um, we were, I think it was a blessing that we started off in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area first, rather than coming straight to LA. It's a much smaller market, similar to Chicago in that there's a lot of short films, indie films, student films. They also have a really, really good commercial market up there. So I was able to kind of start off doing what I did in Chicago, looking for like background work opportunities, finding Facebook groups for actors, and just kind of meeting people, asking questions, going on like message boards and stuff like that. Um, and then slowly but surely kind of navigated the scene, learned about casting networks, which is one of the big, casting profiles. And once I started meeting people, asking them how they do things, what resources do they use, who are their agents, got signed, got some work together, made a demo reel. And I don't know, the more I did it, the more I was in it, the more you learn, the more you figure out what is valued in this industry. It's one thing to be an actor that's like, oh, it's all about the craft. And to some extent, it is. If you love acting and you want to do it for the craft, I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing and fulfilling. But as a business, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the world. And especially in Hollywood movies and TV shows, time is money. So learning about what makes you appealing as an audition or as a potential day player, or someone who'd be considered for a series regular. They're not just going to take someone who's green and off the street saying, hey, I'm talented. You have to learn the business side of it too. And that's kind of how I came into the industry. Yes, it was something I wanted to do, but I think my previous job in medicine gave me kind of a more like a career oriented mindset about it, a more business mindset about it. So I don't know. I kind of always had that in the back of my mind, no matter what I was doing as an actor.
And that's really smart because a lot of people who want to break into it, and even the local film scene we have here, I tell people, yeah, the creative part is great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love directing, I love
Mm-hmm.
writing, but there is that other side to it. Like, it's not just one. It's like a tree. The creative
Mm-hmm.
side is just a branch on the tree. There's
Yeah.
the business side. There's all these other aspects to it, and that's if it's
Mm-hmm.
something you seriously want to do, then you should want to at least have an understanding of all aspects, and that includes the business side. Even if you're not wanting to become a producer or someone who works on the business side,
Mm-hmm.
you got to at least have an understanding of how it works, just for the reasons you mentioned, because that's what the big wigs are going to look for. They look for the big picture.
And just an understanding, like what is the audition process, even, when you first start out, you might not know what is a slate? What do you wear? Do you have to be completely memorized? What do you bring with you? These are all things that you need to kind of learn as you go, or hopefully beforehand. I have a lot of friends who they take so many classes and they take so many workshops, which is amazing. But then they kind of put off the important steps, like I'm going to get an agent once I finish this demo reel, or I'm going to apply to this when I get my new headshots. There's always a reason to delay things. And no matter how talented you are, how great you are at your craft, if no one's going to see you, then you're kind of defeating the purpose, you know? And I feel like a lot of the business side is being able to get the opportunities to put yourself in front of people who are going to be able to watch you and appreciate you and what you can do.
Absolutely. And I will say this, you know, and acting is, I've never really tried it. I've taken a couple of classes and I learned that, you know, it's not for me. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, I think it takes immense courage to stand in a room full of strangers and basically become someone else, because it's just a tool that I don't have. But I respect, you know, you and other really all actors who even at
Mm-hmm.
least attempt it, because trying it is half the battle, because a lot of people don't. Like they say, oh well, you know, I might do that, or yeah, I should do that, but it takes courage to really just attempt it.
You feel very vulnerable putting yourself out there because you are the product, you know, it's this is what you got. So yeah, it's a challenge. It takes some getting used to switching gears.
But what's great about actors too, and especially ones that are really in on the whole process, even, you know, outside of just performing the roles, you know, in my limited experience as a writer director, I love when actors can put their own little spin on a character like that. Because, yeah, like I might write it. Like if you were in a movie that I was writing and directing, yeah, I would write it, but you're the one that's physically doing it. And you might
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, well, what if this character tried this or had this little personality quirk? And do you find that even when you audition for stuff now, do you think of little little layers that you could add to your characters or potential characters?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that comes with more experience and just kind of getting comfortable in front of the camera and getting comfortable with just with the process of being an actor. I think when you start out, you're so nervous about just the words on the page. You know, it's like, how am I going to memorize all of this? Am I going to say it properly? Am I going to, you know, remember my lines? But then after a while, you start to realize that yes, the lines are important, but it's more important, like, what are you saying? So they always say, like, when you do an audition, especially now with tapes, because everything is self-taping, you have to stand out. You have to make a bold choice, right? You hear this all the time as an actor, but when they say you have to stand out and you have to make a bold choice, I don't think they mean like do something crazy. It's more like bring something unique to it, you know? And I think a lot of times it's just be, I don't know, bring yourself to it. Find a way to put yourself in this character's shoes. And sometimes that's the easiest way to be most authentic. When I think about a lot of the Hollywood actors, I feel like there's like two types, you know. On one hand, you've got these very transformative actors who could turn into a totally different person, right? Like Daniel Day-Lewis is a perfect example. Completely transforms himself. He could do all different genres, all different types of characters. Even Bradley Cooper has recently been like really surprising me with his range. But then you've got your other Hollywood actors who always kind of play themselves. Like I feel like Vince Vaughn does that a lot. Tom Cruise is a good example. But that's not to say that they're not getting work. You know, they're being hired for that personality type that they're looking for. So when you are, you know, doing roles or doing auditions, you know, finding layers, finding nuances, having the confidence to put yourself into it and make choices, let the moments breathe, take your pauses, you know, exchange the looks. Like, I don't know, finding these little nondescript things, I think really elevate the scene and really makes it feel a lot more engaging to watch. I would say some of my favorite directors to have worked with in the past are the ones who have a very collaborative relationship with their actors. You know, some writers we know want their words to be exact, like Aaron Sorkin. He writes a lot of words, and you better say every single one of them. But a lot of other, writers and directors, you get on set, you do it the way that they want it written, the way they want it, acted out. And then sometimes if they have faith in you, they say, all right, let's do one more. And this one, make it your own, it gives you a little wiggle room to add in your flair to it, or say something in a way that rolls off your tongue a little easier. Or
That's
improv, straight
yeah.
improv.
And that's got to be a great confidence booster too as an actor, because it shows that the director has the faith in you to attempt
Mhm.
it. And
Yeah.
and that's and the listeners are probably going to be like, "Oh, Derek's going to go on about collaboration again," but that's my favorite part of filmmaking is that, and
Mhm.
it's weird because I don't consider myself to be much of a sociable person, yet I host a
Mhm.
podcast and I've directed 2 short films. But
Yeah.
that's what's great about filmmaking is that you get all these different people from different areas of the country, sometimes the world. You might have
Mhm.
different views on religion, politics, other movies, whatever the case may be, but everyone's there to make the film a
Mhm.
reality. And that's why I say every movie is a miracle in its own way, just because of the sheer amount of people and
Yeah.
resources that it takes to pull them off.
Yes, yes. It's so hard and challenging on a low budget indie level because you have to do everything. You have to wear all the hats and you have to make every dollar stretch. And then even on the high end, like people think, oh, Hollywood, millions and millions of dollars. But I think a lot of people don't realize there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of people on a set. And, everyone on that crew has that one job that they have to do flawlessly for this whole thing to work and run on time. And it's really amazing that things get done and then things get picked up and distributed and then we can watch it from home. I think the whole process is so cool.
Yeah, everyone's a cog in the machine, and it
Yeah.
takes all the
Yeah.
cogs moving together to make the machine work. So I was looking at your IMDb. I did notice that you wrote and directed a couple of short films. One that I watched earlier today called Proud. Uh,
Uh,
so so
uh,
what? So talk to me about the making of that short film, and what motivated you to step behind the camera, because you also starred in it. But what made you also
mhm.
want to step behind the camera?
So I did it for two reasons. One, I wanted to learn more about the process. It's one thing to be an actor, but I think it's always beneficial to know, what goes on behind the camera, well, behind the lens. Also, I think it gave me a much greater appreciation for um my place which is just one more cog, you know what I mean? It's a lot of times I think actors we think it's all about us, but really it's there's so much that has to happen before we even set foot on set. The writers have to write the part for us, agents have to submit us, casting has to select us, directors have to choose us, producers have to approve us, studios have to approve us, and then your scene can't get cut or canceled or edited out, and then the show has to actually get picked up and aired. And I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that you as an actor, your seconds or minutes on screen could fall through the cracks. And one of the things I was noticing at the time is how there were so many incredibly talented and empowered actresses in the industry who were making their own content. They're creating these production studios and making their own limited series and shows and movies. Like Reese Witherspoon, she started a whole production company. She just did was it Big Little Lies I was watching her in, and then Nicole Kidman, I think she's doing her own stuff now. Charlize Theron, I love how she just completely changed the trajectory of her career from being this pretty face that they wanted in these rom-coms, and now she's like probably the most like badass bitch out there. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse,
No, all
but
good.
she's made a career just by being like that character. And I think that's so amazing that you can have that much control over your career as an actress, because otherwise you really don't. So that kind of gave me a chance to learn what happens, what goes into making a movie, which is a lot and is really hard. And this is why I don't do it anymore. So kudos to you for being a producer and a director. But also it kind of gave me the realization that, if it comes down to it, then making your own content is definitely an option out there. And it's a lot of fun. And I think it is very empowering because then you could write the roles you want, you can tell the stories you want. You're not just the puppet on the screen for the show.
Yeah, and I'll say a quick note on Charlize Theron. I remember seeing Mad Max Fury Road for the first time, and I was just blown away by how great she was. And like you said, now she completely reinvented herself. It was incredible.
Yeah, she's the tough gal now. She fights, she does all her own, she does, I think, a lot of her stunts. But yeah, it's just so cool. So cool.
Yeah, and for those who haven't seen it, and I'll put a link in the show notes, on your YouTube channel, you can watch both your short films, actually. You can watch, and like I said, I watched Proud today, and it was really moving. Everything from how it was shot to your performance. Really, I thought the whole cast did a tremendous job, and it's just a really, really good quality film. So I would highly recommend anybody check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
and kudos to you for getting behind the camera, because like we were talking about before, you don't really know if you're going to like it or not until you actually do it. And you find so many actors that will eventually transition to a role behind the camera, or sometimes you'll have some who work behind the scenes and they're like, you know what, I'll give acting a try. And then that's what they end up doing. So
yeah. Especially on these indie films. I feel like you're like, oh, we need background actors. Here, go stand in there for a second. I actually roped my husband into being in Proud. He was the TSA agent.
Okay,
and
cool.
He's never, he's not an actor. He's very camera shy. And I was like, you have 2 lines. It's okay. You can do it. And now he's like, I don't know how you do this. I would never. He's like, I never want to be an actor. It's just really funny how, I don't know, different people are just, I don't know, destined to do different things.
And it's interesting for those who, if you even make a joke to somebody like, hey, you want to be in my movie? People either have zero issue being on camera, or it just freaks them out completely. For me, when I switched to doing podcasts on video, that was a little bit of an anxiety thing for me, because I didn't really have any camera presence or camera experience. And it's even with podcasting, it's different being on camera, because you have to remember, look at this certain area, or present yourself in a certain way. So I just have so much respect for for what you do and everything. It's incredible to me.
Thank you. And you're doing great with the podcasting.
I appreciate that. We actually do have a question in the YouTube stream from Shannon Williams, who's a local actor based here in Pensacola. He asks, and my apologies if I get his name wrong, but how was it working with Jared Kahn on Devil's Revenge?
Oh, he was the director for Devil's Revenge. He's such a funny guy. He's very laid back. That's what I'll say. Sometimes you show up to set and the director's in the zone and you don't want to disturb that person. Heaven forbid, sometimes you get on a set and the director's in a bad mood and then you don't want to disturb the person. When I first walked in, they're getting set up for my scene coming in. I'm coming in from base camp. He's in a rolly chair and he's just spinning around, talking to the grip or the gaffer or the DP, someone. And I was like, okay, cool. Ready to meet the director. And it's him. And I was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. It just kind of set the tone of this is going to be a fun shoot, I will say that film was it was an indie film. It was a great film, great cast. William Shatner's in it, Jerry Ryan's in it, Jason Brooks in it. But it's an indie film. And so had to be resourceful. There was a whole section I remember. I was cast as a nurse. And I think the original script had maybe 5 lines in it or something like that. And there was this huge montage of like having to wheel the patient in on a stretcher down this long hallway into the operating room, into triage, into, and like doing this whole thing. He crashes, he comes back, don't want to spoil things, but all of that in just 5 lines. And Jared's like, why don't you just improv? I was like, wait, what? Improv this whole thing? And it was like, all in all, it's probably a good, 10 minutes or so chunked up throughout the film. And I was like, all right, well, we're going to have to not improv. We're just going to have to like script it right now because there's so many things going on. It's such a chaotic scene. We're going to miss beats if we try and improv it. So me and the other actors in those scenes, we're like brainstorming and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to say. You should say this. You should say that. And then we just pulled it all together. And Jared's just like, yeah, that was great. Let's do it again. So once again, going back to the whole, being collaborative and working with someone. And, once he realized that I had a medical background, he was like, oh, you got this, it was kind of fun. A little nerve-wracking.
I can imagine so. Just like, oh, here, why don't you guys come up with it? Wait, what?
Right. I mean, the bones were there. You know what I mean? The bones were there, but, just yelling like paddles, stat. I don't know. We can't do that for 20 minutes. But it was kind of nice in the sense too, that like, it really did extend our screen time, which as an actor is always amazing, right? We're always trying to get one more line, one more minute, one more interaction.
That's fantastic though. Like it's, I picture that whole scene, like that almost sounds like a movie in itself. Like you're trying to meet the director and it's just not who you think it is at all. But he filmed Atlantic Rim here in Pensacola. So that was why Shannon was asking. So there you go, Shannon. Thank you for the question. No, Shannon's like my biggest fan when it comes to the podcast. So he's always watching and giving feedback and everything. So it's good stuff. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, and that's it. Just goes back to that whole collaborative effort, and you mentioning him being kind of laid back and chill, because you kind of have to do that, especially on those really long days of shooting. You got to keep the mood light, because the last thing you want is to deal with cranky directors, because if that happens, it's like the trickle down effect. If the director's upset, it's going to trickle down to everyone else, and it's going to kill the mood.
That's true. It's really the challenge is finding that balance between, being laid back and not hot-headed, not sweating the small stuff, but then still being efficient, making sure that things are running on time and things that, making sure that everything's falling into place properly. It's, if you have a good team surrounding you, if you have a good first AD and good crew that is able to do their job quickly and competently, all that really helps. But I mean, as a producer, some days it's like half your job is putting things together, and then the other half is just putting out fires, because every day inevitably there's going to be some change in plans.
Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with anything too major, which fingers crossed. I'm sure eventually it will happen, but I count my blessings while I can.
Yeah, that's always good. That's what we hope for.
Something I wanted to go back to with acting specifically, because I noticed on your YouTube channel, you offer like kind of instructional or like help videos for aspiring actors. What are some of the common, like maybe mistakes or misconceptions that you see aspiring actors have?
Wow, that's such a broad question. Gosh, there's a lot of, I feel like everyone who goes into the industry, there is this like preconception of what it is to be an actor or how to make it, and I think a lot of that is Hollywood influence, ironically, but it really doesn't always work that way in the real world. And so I feel that the biggest piece of advice I tell people is manage your expectations. Because if you come in, and I mean, this might be a little insensitive, but if you come in thinking with this entitled mindset, you're going to get discovered. All you need to be is beautiful and talented. I mean, honestly, that's what a lot of people who move to LA wish for. And if that were true, there would be a lot more just beautiful, talented people working in Hollywood as opposed to, taking Instagram photos by the pool. So managing your expectations, recognizing that this is a career just like any other job. It's just very unconventional, but you still have to work towards it. You have to gain experience. You have to put a portfolio together. You have to make connections. You have to apply for jobs, which are these submissions, even before you get the audition, which would then be the interview. If you look at it that way, it takes a lot of effort. And unfortunately, I've met a lot of actors who aren't interested in putting in that kind of work, if that makes any sense. They and it's not that they are looking for the shortcut. It's a lot of times they don't understand what it's going to take to get to the next level of things, such as getting SAG eligible, getting an agent, booking your first role, getting your first TV gig. And a lot of that can also take a long time. It's years of hustling for most people. And a lot of people come into LA saying like, I'm going to give it a year, see what happens, not a lot happens in a year. It takes a year just to even understand what a good headshot looks like sometimes, or, where's your eye line when you're doing self-tape auditions? What is the etiquette? A lot of people have never even set foot on a set before, like a professional set. I tell them, I'm like, if you've not studied this, if you're coming in cold, do background work, understand what it is to be like on a professional production, how long the smallest things will take. The etiquette, the behavior, not the acting, but the interactions between the cast and the crew. And, there's a hierarchy. There's so much more to it than I think a lot of people realize, and really educating yourself about that, I think, is the best piece of advice I can give you, because that'll keep you from making some of the basic mistakes, like calling casting directors, which is always a big no-no, or walking up to the main actor on a movie and asking for a selfie in the middle of the day. That's a no-no. There's some things that'll get you escorted out right away. And there's other mistakes that just make you work very inefficiently. You think you're working hard and doing these things, but you're just spinning your tires in the mud, So I feel like, once again, I just go back to the business side of things. It's like, learn more about the industry, learn more about it as a business, and that'll help you be able to focus your efforts and work smarter and have a goal in front of you all the time. Because just saying, I want to get famous, that's not a one-step goal. There's a million mini steps on the way. So kind of focusing on things one at a time makes it a lot more, I think, attainable and approachable, and will keep you from getting burnt out. And I think that's the trick, not getting burnt out.
There's an old saying that comes to mind. It's fake it till you make it. But I think when it comes to film specifically, you can't fake the work ethic, because it will chew you up and it will spit you out if you don't at least have some idea of what you're getting into. With my first film I ever did, it was low budget indie film, small crew, small cast, but still, you learn really kind of what it takes. And if if it's not for you, you're going to find out relatively quickly. Like you can, because you truly have to love doing it in order to pursue it. And it's, even if you have like a day job, like the job I worked with at the time, I would work from 9 to 5, and then I'd come home, and then I'd work on the script, or, work on finding locations until, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And
Yeah, yeah.
it can be a grind for some people, and that's usually where you learn if it's for you or not.
hmm I mean, if people don't realize what a day on set is like, I'd say it almost always will be about 12 hours. It can hit up to 16 sometimes. And if you're working multiple days in a row, that gets really exhausting. And the conditions aren't always ideal. You know, you think of this like glamorous Hollywood life, but if you're filming overnight and you're cold or it's raining or it's muddy or, you know, there's mosquitoes everywhere, you just got to kind of deal with that. And I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of incoming actors or crew members or, you know, filmmakers, you're going to learn real quick if you're willing to dedicate that amount of time and effort of your life into something that if you can think of something else to do that, you know, because not only might you be happier with it, but it'll probably be easier than trying to find, you know, that elusive success in the filming industry.
But then if it turns out you do love it, there's
Mhm.
nothing else that can replicate it.
No, no,
So
no.
there's no medium. It's just it's one or
Mm-mm.
the other.
It really is. It really is. And like having gone through you know, like 12, 13 years of schooling to go into medicine, which isn't easy either, you know. There's a lot of applications and a lot of tests and a lot of steps in that process, but they're both the industries are both challenging in very different ways, very, very different ways. But I would say with medicine, at least, if you work hard and you kind of prove yourself and establish yourself as professional and reliable and competent, you're going to succeed. You know what I mean? There's going to be a job waiting for you. But as an actor, you could be the most amazing actor out there, and there's just never a guarantee of success. So that hustle is so important. It's so important.
You can't replicate work ethic.
Mm.
That's very true. So I did want to ask about a specific project you work on. I'm pretty sure you knew I was going to ask you, but you've worked on various shows like 13 Reasons Why, NCIS, Fear the Walking Dead.
Mhm.
You had the opportunity to work on a little known show called Stranger Things.
Yes.
What was that like?
Wow. It was life-changing for me. I mean, honestly, it was life-changing for me. Fun fact, that was my very first major like project role. I'd only been doing indie stuff before that. So that was my very first Netflix slash TV slash Hollywood, any project at all. And I was so excited. I was like, I've made it, guys. You know, that was my moment. Um, and at the time, you know, it's on Netflix. So they film everything at once so that you can binge it. So while we were filming it, had no idea that it was going to become what it became. You know, in terms of Hollywood, it was a relatively low budget show that filmed the first season, if you think about it. And it filmed in Atlanta. So I got to go to Atlanta for that. Um, and we even filmed under a code name. It wasn't called Stranger Things. It was called like Montauk or something like that. I think there's like a conspiracy establishment up in upstate New York where they did like, I don't know, time traveling experiments with people or something like that. But I got to do that. I was so excited. My experience was, I was so nervous. I think back now, I've definitely had some cringe moments that I know better now. My scene partner, Randy Haven, who plays Mr. Clark, like in the trailer, getting my hair done. I'm like, oh, this is so wonderful. I'm getting pampered. And he comes and he sits down next to me. And I was just like, hi, I'm Jackie. It's nice to meet you. Would you like to run lines? And he's like, I'm good for right now, but maybe like right before the scene starts. He was so nice. But I was very like overzealous. And I recognize now, I'm like, wow, I was a nut job. Um, After we filmed, I it didn't advertise a whole lot either. It was very much a word of mouth sort of show that caught on. So leading up to it, I was so excited. I told all my friends, I was like, I'm gonna be on the show. You should come over. We'll have like a binge watching party, for like 7 hours because I'm on the seventh episode. My friends are all like, oh, well, okay, well, what's it about? All right, it's an 80s show. It's monsters. It's got a bunch of kids. And they're like, well, I don't know. I don't know about that 80s show monsters. Who's in it? Oh, a bunch of kids and a bunch of people and a Winona Ryder's in it. Winona Ryder, yeah, she hadn't done anything in like 10 years at that point, right? Who's directing it? The Duffer Brothers. They haven't really done a whole lot either. Nobody was excited for this. Absolutely no one was excited for it except for me. So I stayed up by myself with my husband. I forced my husband to stay up with me till about 3 or 4 in the morning, watching it until my scene came on. And then I was hooked because I was already, I forgot I was in it after like the 4th episode. It's so good. And then it was like, I went to bed. The next morning, I started getting a couple of text messages. Hey, I saw you on Netflix. And a week later, I had to turn my notifications off. I did put my phone on silent for a while. It was crazy how it blew up into what it blew up in like the next 2 weeks, I'd say. So
it's really insane the level of popularity that show has turned into, because like it appealed to me from the beginning because I grew up on like 80s pop culture with the types of movies, so it had kind of like that Goonies meets other like E.T. and other forms of 80s pop culture and everything, and just to see what it's become now is crazy. It's funny you mentioned that you forced your husband to stay up, because I really love the show, but my wife is obsessed with it. When the new season came out, it came out at 2 a.m. our time, so we stayed up all night and watched the new season.
Oh, that's so funny.
Thankfully, I didn't have to work the next day, because I think we both slept till like 1 or 2 in the afternoon.
I was gonna say those were long episodes this last season too. My mother was she always had her reservations about me, transitioning into acting, but she was really excited to finally see her daughter on TV, right? So she also started watching, and the way her and my father watch TV is they watch like an episode a night, before they go to bed. They'll watch one episode of something and then they go to sleep. My mom texts me at, I want to say, like 2 in the morning or something like that, which is like 4 a.m. her time or something. It was obscenely in the middle of the night for my mom. And she's like, I just saw you on TV. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I started watching and I couldn't stop. So my mom got hooked on it like the day it got released. And I was like, Ma, it's like 4 in the morning over there. She's like, yeah, I'm going to go to bed. There's only 1 episode left. So she also did that. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so funny.
Yeah, the art of binging has it's fun, but it can also be very dangerous because you lose time so quickly.
Yeah. Every series is like an 8-hour movie now.
Yeah, it's like with when Cobra Kai just came out. Every season, ever since it came out on Netflix, we binge it within a day, and it's fun to do every now and then. Like a show like Stranger Things, I like binging with Cobra Kai, but there are still some shows that I enjoy, like the anticipation of waiting the following week, like Star Wars and what Marvel's been doing with their shows. But with Stranger Things, I don't think I could wait a week.
No. Yeah, they got that suspense hook down, like so good.
Yeah, they do. But it was awesome you had such a great experience, being a part of it, because it, like I said, as someone who's a fan of the 80s, really anything, it just seems like so much fun to be a part of.
It was really nice. It was really, it was it was an exceptional first experience for me. I'll say that. I'm very grateful in hindsight with that. That was my first experience on a set, because everyone was nice. Like the directors, the Duffer Brothers, were very welcoming, even though I was just there for the one scene, they weren't just brushing me off as like a co-star. They were like, "Hi, thanks for coming out. Welcome to set. This is so and so introducing me to people." And like, "So how are you feeling about the scene? Are you comfortable with it? Do you have any questions?" Like they were just very welcoming. And I mean, I hadn't encountered it before, but you don't often encounter that now. If that makes any sense.
Mhm.
And then the crew, like it was a happy set, like everyone was in a good mood. Everyone kind of knew that they were onto something that people were going to enjoy, even if the audience didn't know it yet, you know? So it was just a very good vibe on set.
That's fantastic. Well, as we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask what's next for you? Do you have any current projects that you have in the works?
I have, so I'm actually flying out to Chicago tomorrow for a new series. There's a lot as an actor that we just can't reveal, unfortunately. A lot of NDAs and such. I can say I have three TV shows that will be coming out at various points in the upcoming year and or upcoming months, I should say. I'll be posting about them on my social media as soon as I'm allowed to. But yeah, I have a movie that just got released. I can talk about that one. It's called Paradise Highway. It's a thriller, has to deal with the sex trafficking industry. Juliette Binoche's in it. Morgan Freeman is in it. Frank Grillo is in it. It's got a pretty good cast. And me. So I was pretty excited for that one, to see that in theaters.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have you back on at some point to talk about your other projects once they're completed.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd love that.
Usually, I like to end the interviews with this, but because it's October and Halloween horror month and all that fun stuff,
Mhm.
what is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh gosh, all of them. All of them. Um, I'd say the first horror movie that really scared the bejesus out of me was Poltergeist. Something about that movie just unnerved me when I was like 7 or 8, or way too young to be watching it. I like snuck away. Um, Scariest. I'd say anything with a zombie that runs. I have a particular fear of zombies, which is ironic because I've done a couple of zombie projects. But if it runs like 28 days later, like just, I don't know, that doesn't sit well with me. I actually have nightmares. I think it might actually go back. I think I have a theory. It might go back to me being a pathologist, because I used to do autopsies and, studied forensics and stuff. So maybe there's something just inherently wrong with seeing something dead reanimated. Yeah, that's my answer.
There's an idea for a horror movie in what you just said.
Yeah. They actually have this rule. They're like, if you like pretend to be in a body bag, if that's a prank, like apparently someone had done that before. There was actually a thing. They were like, don't do that. You will get in so much trouble.
Sounds like a good way to get punched in the face too.
Oh my God, yeah.
uh, awesome. Well, do you have a website or social media you'd like to plug so the listeners can follow you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter and Instagram under Jax Dallas, JaxDallas. I'm also on Facebook, Jackie Dallas. I have a page, just Jackie Dallas Actress, I believe. I think those are the only three things I have. JackieDallas.com is my website. Oh, I want to do a quick plug. I've got a true crime podcast also. I just want to plug that real quick, that my girlfriend and we started doing a couple months back. It's called Two Girls, One Crime. We're hoping that it collects a little bit of traction there. If there's any other 80s babies out there, there's a pop reference in there. But yeah, and it's just Two Girls, One Crime, and that's on all of the different platforms too. So that's kind of my little pet project right now that I'm working on as well, in addition to all the TV stuff.
That's fantastic. No, I'll have to check that out because I remember a few years ago when the true crime podcasts, like they really started to become popular. So I have to check that out.
Yeah, we're in season 2. We've got, I think, about 29 episodes out so far. And basically the concept is we eat dinner, we drink, we talk true crime. We're very entertaining, if I do say so myself. But yeah, it's good times.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well, so the listeners can check it out.
Hey, thank you.
Awesome. Jackie, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat. This was wonderful. I'd love to have you back on the show at some point.
I'd love to be back, Derek. Yeah, just send me an email and invite me over.
Fantastic. If you'd like to subscribe to the show, just head over to linktree.com/featurepresspod. You can find everything from social media information to where you can download the podcast. And don't forget, we are live every Monday night on YouTube at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's going to do it for this week's show. Be sure to come back next week for another fun episode of Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond.